Live. Hi guys, it's Janae, aka the Mobile Monger again, and with me I have the one, the only Mateo Kaler. So, Mateo from Jasper Hill Farms, tell me about Jasper Hill and what you guys do, and a little origin story.
Um, so my brother Andy and I started this business really as with the intention of satisfying three intrinsic needs: meaningful work in a place that we love with people that we love. And the meaningful work part is really about the conservation of our landscape, which is kind of iconic, pastoral, northern New England, you know, the footprint of the farmer on the land. And, a lot of people take that working landscape for granted, but it's really tied to an economy, a global economy, and for the last 150 years or so, an economy that whose like epicenter is migrated west, and that includes the dairy industry. And so we dreamed up this idea of Jasper Hill really as a vehicle to conserve the things about our landscape that define the beauty of this place. And so we started in 2003, 15 Ayrshire heifers making raw milk cheese. We started with a little cheese called Constant Bliss, and we rode a wave. I think, we had really good timing, and we learned from our mistakes. We made cheese 7 days. We've been making cheese 7 days a week for 18 years. In 2006, collaboration with Cabot Creamery, which is right down the road from us, yielded a Best in Show at ACS, American Cheese Society, which was a kind of totally out of left field experience for us. And we took that opportunity to reimagine what artisan cheese in our community might look like, and built the cellars at Jasper Hill, which is 22,000 square feet underground, 7 vaulted cellars where we mature our own cheese and the cheeses of a handful of other artisan cheesemakers from the neighborhood. So here we are, about to turn 18 next month. It's crazy.
That's amazing. I mean, honestly, I feel like my career has had the same trajectory because I have been in cheese for just 1 year longer than Jasper Hill. And I remember getting
That's
Constant
amazing.
Bliss back in the day and being like, what is this weird little thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Constant Bliss put us on the map. And it was a precious, impossible to scale kind of cheese that probably didn't make any sense, ruined my body, my wrists and shoulders, and but it was iconic in the moment. And I think it's a cheese that brings a lot of nostalgia to a lot of people, including me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you talk about your relationships with the farms that you work with and the other cheesemakers that you work with in terms of the sellers?
Sure. So, it's not like we had a plan, like, this is the solution. We're engineering solutions to problems that producers in our and we are dealing with, every day. And so our model is really shifted. When we started making cheese, we were like, we're going to demonstrate that you can still make a decent living milking 45 cows on a rocky hillside farm. And if we can do it, then, God knows we didn't know a tit from a telephone pole when we started. Everybody should be able to do it. And it turned out that being a farmstead cheesemaker and succeeding in the farmstead cheese business is incredibly complicated. You have to be good at a lot of different things. And the cellars was really our attempt to lower the barriers to entry for farmers that might be able to capture the value add of the cheese making step without having to be good at calling on customers or collecting from restaurants or managing supply chains. And so, you know, we had this like build it and they will come philosophy, and we built the cellars, and they came, cheesemakers from all over Vermont, and they came with their quality problems, and they came with their lack of capacity to fix some fundamental things about their operations, and they came with their differing philosophies on food safety, and they came right, and it became clear to us over the first couple of years that we needed to work with a producer group that shared the same kind of core values and commitment to quality that had gotten us to where we were at the time. And so we work with fewer producers now, cheesemakers now, than we did 10 years ago. But those are relationships that have lasted, that have stood the test of time. They're like marriages. And so, you know, we've got Landaff from Doug and Deb Erb in Landaff, New Hampshire, make this amazing raw milk farmstead cheese. It's one of my favorite cheeses of all time. It's, you know, I always judge a cheese by the rate of the disappearance rate on a board, and it has like broad appeal. It's a subtle raw milk cheese that has character and will whisper to you, you know, minutes after you've eaten it. And it's also, you can eat a lot of it. Kids love it. It's accessible. And those the herbs there, that's real people right there, you know, salt of the earth, and exactly the kind of people and producers that, you know, the Cellars was imagined for. We've got the Von Trapp farmstead. Sebastian, you know, came and made cheese with us for a year and a half before he moved back to his family's farm and started making cheese from the milk of his parents, on his parents' dairy farm. And they make a cheese for us called Oma. It's a wash-dried classic, really, in honor of Oma Von Trapp, his grandmother, who did all the hard work on the farm, from what I understand. And Skolton Family Farm over in Weybridge, Vermont, make an organic button lactic cheese called Weybridge, which we ripen. We mature cloth-bound cheddar for Shelburne Farms as well. And some of my favorite people out there.
We'll be talking to them. I'll talk to them next. So
yeah, I gotta say that Alec and his life partner Megan Camp are some of my all-time heroes, and you know, we just like bend over backwards and do anything for them. Shelburne Farms is an incredible organization. We also buy milk from our neighbors. So we're buying milk from 2 farms in Greensboro. When we started, when we grew up here, there were 35 farms in Greensboro. And when we started Jasper Hill, there are 9. And 1 went out last year. So I think we're down to 8 farms in Greensboro at this point. And we're the first new farm to come on in a generation. And we recognize that, you know, Tom Hill and, you know, Dan and Emily up on Bar Hill, they're not going to make cheese, but they represent, you know, that iconic, you know, hill farm in Greensboro. And so we are buying milk from them, and that milk goes into cheeses like Harbison, Moses Sleeper, pasteurized soft cheeses primarily. And you know, we're really like refocusing on our mission on plugging as many acres within our community, which we consider to be a 15-mile radius of here, into the market that we built in whatever form we can. We're trying to support the acreage and the people on the land.
That's beautiful. I love it. So how many cheeses do you actually make at Jasper?
Oh boy, we keep adding cheeses, and so it's a little hard to keep track of here. I think we're up to about 10 if you add the mixed milk cheeses that we launched this past year. So I think we're somewhere in 10, around 10.
Yeah.
And if you want, I could try and list them off, but
you don't have to. I'm sure you can go to the website, I'm sure, and find an entire listing of all the things.
Yeah. They all play a different role.
Yeah.
Yeah. They all play a very specific role. You know, it's we've got Harbison and Moses Sleeper soft cheeses that really generate the cash flow that support the day-to-day operations. We've got cheeses like Cabot Clothbound. I didn't mention Cabot. Cabot is really like the donkey, the cheese that does all the heavy lifting. That gives us the weight that we use to build cold chain logistics and distribution that benefits all the producers we work with, and generates the cash flow because of that volume to cover the cost of it allows us to carry the cost of inventory and cash flow other cheese makers. That cheese does a lot of heavy lifting for us. And so Alpha Tolman's like the piggy bank, right? When we have extra milk, like in COVID-19 days, we make a lot more Alpha Tolman. And Bailey is like an intermediate cheese. So if you think of a farmstead cheesemaker, cannot just turn the tap off. We need a range of products with different aging times that we can divert milk into in order to both support cash flow and balance the milk supply, and with some intermediate strategies like Bailey, Haze, and Blue in the midst.
Awesome. So previous to COVID, your distribution is you're nationally distributed. You supply to cheese shops across the country. What would you say is your percentages from restaurants to into distribution, so you don't necessarily know where it goes to? What do you do direct, and then you do online sales also direct to consumer? So can you just talk about those percentages essentially?
So we found out about the week of the 16th of March how much of our cheese was going into food service, and it's about 35%. Because those sales ended overnight. Since the middle of March, a lot of our retail sales have dropped off too, because shops, some of them are having a hard time making up the volume that they did pre-COVID, because curbside delivery and selling cheese over a counter is not the way it used to be. And our baseline sales are about 60% of what they were pre-COVID. We're also struggling with even some of Whole Foods and some national retailers who don't have the labor anymore to cut cheese, right? So I would say that our experience is that food service is gone and retail is quite soft, and mail order is blowing up in a way that has allowed us to keep everybody in the business busy. It's a lot more work for the pounds of cheese that we're shipping out the door, but our mail order is up about 1,400% over the same period from last year, and it's a hockey stick. It's been crazy. So I think we're selling between like 1 and 200 boxes a day, average, something like that.
Wow.
And that's been amazing because it's instant cash flow. People pay for the cheese before it leaves the building, and it's enabled us to keep our team intact.
Yeah.
We made the really difficult decision in late March to disperse the herd of cows at Jasper Hill. We found ourselves in a position where we had too much milk, about 50 cows too much milk, and we're looking out at a scenario in which it was unclear how long this was going to last. We need to take our expenses down. We were, geared up, staffed up to grow the next couple of years. We had a couple of big projects on the dashboard. And instead we were having to figure out how to shrink, and taking the cows out of the equation basically cuts about $50,000 to $60,000 a month in expenses. And those cows went over to Tom Hill and Dan and Emily's and up to Andersonville. So they're still in the system. But our day-to-day operations around here are a lot quieter. We're still making cheese 7 days a week, but just less of it. And in hindsight, it was an easy decision to make. It was brutal at the time, but taking the steps to try and preserve our team has been kind of the driving principle for us.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can keep that up.
Yeah, well, and then also just the shift of responsibilities for all of your employees too, going from dealing mostly with distribution to having that intense of a shift to mail order. So how has that been, just kind of getting everybody on board with that?
It's a total scramble because we're doing way more than holiday levels of sales in mail order. But we have an awesome team, and people are in it to win it here. We're if we've had any success, it's because we've been able to put together the most incredible group of humans, and they're true believers, and they're gonna go down trying to make it all work. So I'd say that there's been you got to remember that we also completely reinvented our operations. We split our whole crew into 2 shifts that don't overlap. We took those shifts and broke them up into pods that don't take breaks at the same time. It's the whole COVID management, trying to keep our facilities safe. That we started with that before there was any uptick in mail order, and now it feels like we got the hang of this now. So I think we're all working more than we've worked in years. It's been super intense, and there's been some sleepless nights and a lot of stress and worry about the future. But I think we're going to survive this. It's going to be painful, but we'll make it.
I believe that for sure. Is there any other strategies besides mail order that you've seen kind of come through as profitable avenues?
Well, we keep hearing from our customers that exact weight pre-cut pieces of cheese are pretty much where it's at. And there's a little part inside of me that, is dying. But we pulled the trigger on an exact weight cutting equipment and flow packing equipment. in order to try and deliver a really high quality, delicious piece of cheese in a format that scannable, that like meets our customers where they are. And we're going to be rolling that out. So it's Cabot cloth bound, Landaff, Alpha Tolman, and Bailey will be a follow up at some point in little flow packed pouches, gas flushed,
Okay.
European style like packaging. So we'll see how that goes, but at this point, from where we're at, it seems like that's our only like real potential strategy to make up any kind of like lost ground on volume, because we're forecasting we're going to be down 25 to 30% this year, and we've never shrunk. So this is a whole new experience for us. Like shrinking without disappearing, that's the trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, definitely. So has this affected your affinage processes at all? Because I was talking to Cascadia Creamery yesterday, and when the bottom kind of fell out for them, they started putting things into coolers to, get it in stasis so it kind of can hold for a little bit more. Have you guys done any sort of that?
Not yet. We're in the process now of trying to sell and move about 500 or 600 wheels of Cabot cloth bound. And that's like our most immediate priority. We have, I think 10 or 12,000 homeless Harbisons and 2,800 wheels of Bailey that, are going to age out between now and the end of June if we don't figure this out. And the challenge is, all this cheese was like made before COVID, and so it's like a freight train on one hand. And the issue with cloth bound is because the cellars are full and we're operating at near capacity. If we don't get that cheese out, then we won't have cheese to sell during the holidays. And so it's like we've learned this the hard way in the past. So there's a chance we're going to need to like pull some cheese out in order to get cheese that's been made already in for the holidays, because it's one thing to get kneecapped in March and April, and it's a whole other experience when that happens in November and December. So at this point, we're trying to make decisions that are going to maximize the possibility that we'll have a decent holiday season. Nobody knows what's going to come. It's depression, more social distancing. We're probably in for a pretty rough ride. And most cheesemakers and retailers, as you know, make their profit in the fourth quarter, and we lose money a lot of months out of the year getting to the fourth quarter. So we're trying to make decisions now that will improve our chances of making some money in October, November, December, because that's what really floats us the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes.
Well, it's also, that's like an impossible, thing to do, because you're like looking in a crystal ball trying to figure out what's going to happen when this has just kind of shook our entire ground overnight practically. So who knows what's going to shake again and like what's going to happen. So
I think everybody is starting to understand what cheesemakers are are facing here. And I think we're going to see some real movement and like kind of the spirit of the American market kind of rise up to protect and conserve cheeses that will otherwise, be gone. And we've seen like real committed response from Whole Foods and Murray's and look at Kowalski's, like putting our cheese, and not just our cheese, but American artisan cheese up and leaning into it. And we're trying to figure out how to formulate a response that really leverages the whole chain and can benefit everybody between us and the consumer with a very clear and concise message. And I'm not sure if you've heard about Victory Cheese.
I have, yeah. Just started
Victory
hearing about
Cheese.
it.
That website launched today, and I'm hoping that we can all just like really rally around to support cheesemakers, retailers, and the chefs that have championed our cheeses for all these years, and do something for one another, because we are all one and connected, and we're going to get through this if we can figure out how to speak a common language around and articulate what's at risk and what we have to lose, right? So that consumers can choose with their dollars. It's I think the hashtag is choose it or lose it.
Yeah, I like that. For sure. So you mentioned some bigger projects that you are kind of already planning, probably already in the midst of. Like, what has this kind of done for that, those projects?
Yeah, so we're the core tenant in a shared use food incubator called the Vermont Food Venture Center. And that's basically managed by an organization called the Center for an Ag Economy. And it's a nonprofit that's really dedicated towards supporting value-added producers and connecting farmers in our area with markets and like market facilitation, and also food access and food justice issues in our community. The Center for an Ag Economy asked us to be the core tenant in another project. And so over the past 2.5 years, we've designed, developed, and gotten funding for like the Cellars at Jasper Hill 2.0, which is not as sexy or romantic as 22,000 square feet underground. It's like a distribution hub where we would mature some cheese and put like cut and wrap facilities, facilitate distribution of our products and others in a warehouse in Hardwick. And that's like a $10 million project all in. And that, like the funding for that, the funding announcement for that just like landed in March. And we're supposed to break ground this summer on that. And we're going to see, we haven't really like figured out whether or not both the market and the resources are going to be there in a year or two to support the kind of growth that would be required to really like own that kind of a bold move at this moment. We're feeling inclined because we're optimists, and we believe that there's a future for delicious cheese, and we want to try and figure out how to like broaden the market and create access to to better cheese. So we haven't jumped ship. We haven't given up. But it's hard to like figure. It's hard to see that far. I mean, I feel like I've been riding a ping pong ball a little bit. If people say it's a roller coaster, I think it's more like a ping pong ball.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty apt analogy, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so then you guys have also been experimenting with some mixed milk cheeses and stuff too, and a goat farm that you are working with. So can you tell me about those projects?
Yeah, so Bridgman Hill Farm is a partnership between Jasper Hill and Annie Rowden and Ryan Andrus. They were the farmers at Cypress Grove. They started the farm up in McKinleyville with Mary, and grew that to about 1,000 goats, and decided to make a move. I think they were smitten with the mission piece out here, and we had a real like hot and heavy romance, and like sealed the deal in kind of a record time. It was basically from the time we met to the time we were milking goats was like 2 years, and during that time we were able to like buy a farm, build facilities, find a herd of goats, which we purchased. And along with that herd of goats came a brand and a bottling equipment. And so that business started up last summer, and we started putting milk in bottles in November. And cheese is how we balance like the milk supply. So we get a weekly order, we put milk in bottles, and we take any excess milk and make either Eligo, which is like a Taleggio type mixed milk brick, washed rind, Bridgman Blue, which is like a Forme d'Ambert format, so smaller than Bailey, much more piquant. It's delicious. Mixed milk blue, or Highlander, which is our go at kind of a mountain style. Have you had them?
I have not actually.
Oh, geez.
I feel like I might have had the Highlander, but I haven't yet.
I had the Eligo or Bridgman. I think Highlander is going to be a real winner. I'm putting my money on Highlander. I think Highlander is going to come out of nowhere the next couple of years. And
I trust your instincts. You knew when you were gonna win some awards at ACS, so I feel like you've got pretty good intuition on those sort of things. So
I really like Highlander. I think I just leave it at that. I think Highlander for the win. Yeah.
Well, I definitely need to get my hands on some for sure. So, let's see. Since you have your hands kind of in so many different things, for a burgeoning cheese business, is there any recommendations that you would make for somebody who is kind of just getting started right now through all of this? Like things that they should definitely make sure to have in their business plan, and thoughts that they need to be really concrete in their brains?
I think it's an awesome time to start a business, actually. When I look back at the sellers, We started selling cheese out of the cellars in the fall of 2008. And it wasn't obvious and in the winter of 2009 that we were going to like make it. But starting a business in this kind of climate and environment has a real kind of focusing effect. And if there's one thing I would say is that quality is the differentiator. And if you can manage to turn that into a mantra, make it some kind of a religious principle, the chances of coming out the other side on top are much better than if you lose track of that. Now, there's always going to be a space and demand for delicious cheese. And if there's anything I've learned is there isn't a secondary market for not that great, like farmstead raw milk or artisan cheese. It really is about deliciousness. So, focus on that, and the rest will come. But
that's a very optimistic outlook, which I appreciate, because I've definitely had some people that were like, run, don't do it. But firsthand, so.
I mean, if you're going to do it, make it worth it. Make it delicious. You know what I mean? 100%. It's too much work. So here's the other thing that I've learned is it's pretty much the same amount of work to make junk cheese as delicious cheese. It's like the actual like sweating and cleaning and like, all the rest of it. It's the same amount of work. So.
And that's a lot of work. I know, because I've been in there making cheese with you, and it is not easy at all.
Yeah.
And that's why when people ask me like, oh, do you want to be a cheesemaker? I'm like, no. Not really my thing. I'd rather be behind the counter and like talking to people about cheese. So
yes.
Yeah. So kind of one big final question: what can mongers, distributors, cheese shops, what can they do to help collaborate with you guys to sell your cheese? And basically, what can we do to help you move through some of that cabot, apparently?
I think it really is creating the urgency and the consciousness and understanding that these cheeses you cannot be taken for granted. They need to be consumed, and it's not just our cheese. It's every artisan cheesemaker in the country is having the same experience. We're not unique or special or different. Everybody's up against the same kind of challenges, and consumers spend 50 cents of every food dollar at a restaurant. And the ingredients and the relationships that chefs have built with suppliers have fueled the explosion of cheesemakers like us and everybody else. And they've been taken off the table. Consumers need to vote with their forks and consume more American artisan cheese, or they'll be gone. So I think it's really about telling that story, building the urgency, helping consumers understand that the best way of ensuring that the cheeses they love are gonna be here later is to eat more cheese.
Yeah.
Simple. Yeah. Look at, and it's like win-win. It's like pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Eat more cheese.
It's a good date night when you're just sitting at home, or
Yeah. And affordable luxuries. You know what I mean? Treat yourself.
100%.
to something special more often. Yeah, eat more better cheese. And
I
thanks,
agree.
Liz. Yeah.
Yeah. She's probably been showing off her
Yeah.
Kowalski's, her
Yeah.
Kowalski's
Special wash.
cheese.
Yeah.
Well, is there any other pressing things that you don't think that we got to in this conversation?
I think, I would just put it out there that like farmstead cheesemakers specifically are in a real bind in the sense that we're not able to just switch it off. Um, the sun comes up and the sun goes down, and cows get milked twice a day, and they haven't noticed that there's like, global historical event going on. Um, and so think about your farmstead cheesemakers out there, and try and figure out how to really support them, because they cannot. There's no switch. Yeah.
100%. Well, I want to thank you so much. I know that you guys are so wildly busy right now with trying to restructure your entire business to a different buying model than you're used to. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And I also have to give out a big shout out to Zoe, who's been answering questions in the Facebook Live.